الله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome back to part 2 of our talk. Inshallah, we'll start just to reflect what we said last time. We said atheism is unnatural, irrational. It is counter to default state of the mind because its cognitive position is not intuitive. It has to be acquired. As opposed to theism or belief in God, on the other hand, is natural, is rational, and represents a default state of the mind because its cognitive position is intuitive, does not need to be acquired. We also say the faith in God is foundational belief. It's universal, is untaught, is natural, is intuitive, and is incorrigible. It is self-evident truth, which requires no proof, and there is, therefore, it is the human's default state. We also said the atheists, they need to answer first the question, what reason do they have to reject God's existence? And they have not been able to produce valid arguments so far. We also said without God, no one can make sense of the origin of the universe and life. Life will have no meaning, value, or purpose. There will be no objective ground to anchor our morals and ethics. And it will not matter how we live our lives, whether we live it negatively or positively. I want you to connect today the idea of the foundational belief to the idea of fitrah. But before I do that, if you look at this picture, it gives you global religious landscape, and on the left you have a breakdown of number of people in the world adhering to different religions, meaning they believe in God. And you will see that majority of the world population actually believe in God. You know, what it says unaffiliated. And unaffiliated, they could be unaffiliated to particular religion, and some of these will be atheists as well. It's only 16%. So if you break it down, let's say 50-50, you will say maybe about about 8% of the world population actually don't believe in God. The rest of the population, in one way or the other, they believe in God. We may differ in terms of understanding the nature of God and the path to salvation, but majority of the world population actually believe in one supreme being. Now, on the right, it tells you that Islam is growing faster than any other major religion, and by 2050, they project that Islam will outgrow Christians, or it will be the same, or they will outgrow. But also what is interesting, the paragraph just below it, it says atheists and people who do not affiliate with any religion, although it may increase in some particular countries, like the US, France is very much into atheism, but overall it will be declining. And this is in line with what we said last week, that atheism died actually last century, and this century it has just been resuscitated, but because it is still a dead body that people are trying to give it life, I don't think it will come into full life, and therefore that's the reason it's gonna decline. So this is our agenda for today. We're doing a part 2 today, and I want to connect this concept of fitrah to the foundational belief, and then we will use reason to reach to the existence of God, and I will try to respond to some of the atheist arguments using what we have learned through our proofs. So the idea of faith in God as a foundational belief should not be difficult to be accepted in the Western thought. Why? Because in the Western thought, this idea of foundational belief is already there in different areas, whether in mathematics, or whether in science, whether in engineering. They do accept this idea of foundational belief, meaning they believe in certain things or certain parameters or certain ideas without being able to prove. And they use those as assumptions. And therefore, when we say believe in God is a foundational belief, it should not shock them. It should be acceptable. And this is a reason why you'll find the world population believe in God. Majority of the world population believe in God. Now, it is also in line with the Quranic concept of fitra and the original human nature, or the innate disposition of human being to recognize God.
فأقم وجهك للدين حنيفا فطرة الله التي فطر الناس عليها لا تبديل لخلق الله ذلك الدين القيم ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون.
So our reference of fitra is in the Quran itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he asserts and he tells us that, he created the people with this fitra of Allah, right? It's part of the nature of the human being to recognize God. Now, we also have this hadith, and this is a very important hadith because it's a key quotation in trying to help us to understand what is this fitra means. And the fitra, literally it means original, and in this context, it will mean the original nature of creation. And it's very interesting if you look at the text, it says no child is born except that he is upon innate nature, but his parents make him a Jew or a Christian or polytheist. And it makes a comparison to an animal who is delivered as a perfect baby, but then some people, they disfigure these animals after they are being born. Now, what it means here, because it doesn't say the parents will make him a Muslim. It mentions Judaism, it mentions Christianity, and it mentions polytheism, but it doesn't mention Islam. Why? Because the human beings are actually born already wired to accept Islam, meaning to accept submission to the will of God. That's what it means. Now, fitra as a goodness means that the spiritual, the intellectual, and the moral nature of human being is designed in a way that makes it necessary to believe in God, to worship Him alone, and to act righteously to maintain a well-being if one chooses to do so, because there is also an element of free will, which we will talk about it. So just to summarize, what is fitra? Fitra is the natural, original state of human being at birth. Fitra is a state of intrinsic goodness, pure, sinless, recognizing God deeply in our souls or in ourselves, and also longing for Him. The nature of fitra is such that it does not require external factors to make a person believe in God or act righteously. And this is in line with the definition that we gave of foundational belief. But it needs external factors to cause a person to deviate. So the environment is very important, because the environment is the one that causes people to deviate. Also, it's the environment that can help you to grow your fitra to full potential. if the fitra of a person is nurtured and well protected, and this is very important to protect our fitra, human being will find belief and virtues appealing to your heart. And disbelief and vice, is something that you abhor, you reject automatically. Not only, the fitra, there's a reference in the Quran about the first covenant between God and human beings. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that the progeny of Adam had spiritual existence before coming to this material world, where they took the first covenant and they testified that God is their Lord. Therefore, human beings, we possess primordial awareness of God, and this constitutes our nature even prior to our conception in our mother's womb. Even before we were conceived, we already know about the existence of God.
وَإِذْ أَخَذَ رَبُّكَ مِنْ بَنِي آدَمَ مِنْ ظُهُورِهِمْ ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ وَأَشْهَدَهُمْ على أنفسهم ألست بربكم قالوا بلى شهدنا أن تقولوا يوم القيامة إنا كنا عن هذا غافلين.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is explaining to us why he made us to testify, because tomorrow when we go back to him on the day of resurrection, we should not say we were not aware of him. And therefore, this awareness of God is something part of our nature. Now, if we listen to this.
عرضنا الأمانة على السماوات والأرض والجبال فأبين أن يحملنها وأشفقن منها وحملها الإنسان إنه كان ظلوما جهولا.
Now in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is explaining to us that human beings accepted God's trust when all other creatures decline. Now the Quran commentators refer to this trust as two things: the human self-awareness, the consciousness, and the freedom of choice, the free will. These two things enable human beings to develop and to grow morally, intellectually, and spiritually, and to quest for perfection and excellence. Now we have these two verses that shows the nearness of God to human soul or human self.
وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ وَنَعْلَمُ مَا تُوَسْوِسُ بِهِ نَفْسُهُ وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْكُمْ وَلَكِنْ لَا تُبْصِرُونَ.
So in these two verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he asserts that he is much nearer to us than our own self. How can it be more near? It means that he is running our lives. This underlies our recognition of God, our complete dependence on him, and our need to submit to his will. Now, to many, God seems to be far and unreachable, but he reassures us in these two verses that he is much nearer to us than our own souls or our own selves. Now, he has also given us the power of reason. atheists, they want us to think there's no difference between a human being, an animal, and a plant. But this is not what the Islamic teachings. Now, in the vegetation domain, the perfection and excellence of plants is to bear fruits. And the condition of nature that are available for this development is determined for them. They don't determine themselves. There is no element of consciousness or free will in vegetation domain. But even if you look at the animal domain, consciousness and free will is limited to the level of basic instincts. And the perfection and excellency in their physical abilities to search for food and to perform physical work. But in the human domain, in addition to the feature that you can find in the vegetation and animals, human beings have been bestowed with this extra privilege of consciousness and free will, which is existentially is part of our nature to pursue perfection and excellence through the exercise of this consciousness and free will, but also the faculty of reason. Animals are not interested to make improvement in their lives, in their domains, just like a human being. You know, they are satisfied with the basic things. You know, the type of food, the type of dwellings. They're satisfied. But human being always is looking at ways to, to perfect his surrounding and his means, and to reach to the excellence. Now, the use of reason is very significant in understanding the fundamental reality which is important to all human beings, and that is knowing the Creator. And if you transit this life and you miss all the signposts that are pointing toward the Creator, you have not attained that human perfection and excellence. Even if you are able to build skyscrapers, if you're able to reach to the moon, you have not been able to reach that perfection, because that perfection is to recognize your Creator. Now, the Quranic depiction of human nature is by far more insightful and more dignified in comparison to atheists. Their appalling and very depressing image of Darwinian ape squatting in human family tree, something that is totally opposed to the Islamic concept of human dignity and the best of creation. So let's look at how Islam depicts human nature. First of all, human being is a progeny of Adam. And we pre-existed in the spiritual realm before we came to this world. Human being is the vicegerent, Khalifa of God on earth, the trustee of this earth. Human being is given the trust, the consciousness, and the free will. Human being was taught by God. As such, he possesses the creative intelligence. Human being is created in the best of molds and has been honored. Human being was given the natural disposition, the fitrah. And human being is placed on the highest pedestal in the hierarchy of creations, because human being is the best of the creation. The world was prepared for human beings before their coming. And of course, human being has a dual nature of body and spirit, with this consciousness and free will and the power of reason. So the depiction of human nature in the Quran or in Islam is so powerful, we cannot exchange with the atheistic appalling view of a human being. And anyone who thinks atheist gives a better solution to Islam must be very irrational. Okay, so that's concludes our concept of fitra. And therefore, the concept of fitra is very much in line with this idea of, the fundamental belief, irrespective whether, because it's a self-evident truth, irrespective whether one can prove it or not. It's a self-evident truth. So now let's look at the existence of God. Muslim scholars have developed several proofs for God's existence, his oneness and his attributes based on reason. And many of these arguments or proofs, they're very simple and they require minimum premises or syllogisms. Now, one such proof, which I will present it today, is cosmological argument, and it was put forward by Al-Farabi in the 10th century, but later it was improved by Ibn Sina and Imam al-Ghazali, and it is accepted by both by philosophers and by theologians. Now, let's look at this argument step by step. Existence, yeah, God exists, and human beings, we exist, things exist. Now, we use this common terminology, existence. So existence is divided into three categories. There is a necessary existence, or wajib al-wujud, which is predicated for that which does not need a cause for its existence. It exists by itself or by its own essence. And this is what we're going to attribute as existence of God, because God does not need a cause. He exists by his own essence. We also have a possible or contingent existence, or mumkin al-wujud, which is predicated of things which can conceivably either exist or not exist, but which must have a cause if they are to exist. So in the case of necessary existence, it must exist. But in the case of possible existence, it may exist or it may not exist. And that's why we use this terminology, necessary existence and a possible existence. We also have impossible existence, or mumtani' al-wujud, which is predicated of things whose existence will involve a logical contradiction. For example, the Christian, they say Jesus is both God and human. Now, from Islamic perspective, that is impossible existence. You can't have you cannot have a human being and a God at the same time, because God represents attributes of perfection. A human being doesn't. So you can't have these two. In a more simpler example, maybe I can give example. You can't have a married bachelor, because a bachelor is a person who is not married, linguistically, and a married person is a person who went into a marriage contract, you can say. Another example, maybe you can't have a rectangular circle, because a circle, by definition, and rectangular, these are two different things. Now, in our discussion, because the third category of existence does not have external reality, it's only in our minds. It doesn't have external reality, so we will not be bothered about it. So we will focus on those two modes of existence, the necessary existence and the possible existence. Now, If we disregard the impossible existence, we are left existence either necessary or possible. Now, a possible existence is an effect, ma'lul. Why? Because it always needs a cause, illah. This is very important, and this is what differentiates a possible existence from a necessary existence. A necessary existence does not need a cause, but a possible existence needs a cause, therefore it's an effect. Now, since possible existences are known to exist, for example, the universe exists, human beings we exist, animals exist, plants exist, all these things exist. Therefore, these objects must have causes that have brought them into existence. And if these causes are also possible existence, they in turn must also have causes. Because an endless chain of causes is impossible. Why is impossible? Because we will not be able to explain why then these objects have existed. It will be contradictory. We can't have just an endless chain of causes. If you have this series of causes and effect, you must end with a first cause that itself does not have a cause for its existence, or you can call it a no-cause cause. This first cause then must exist necessarily. That is, it must be a necessary existence, or meaning it exists but without a cause. And it is expected that the first cause could not have similar attributes of thing that it had caused to exist. Already now we can see, the attributes of the necessary existence you expect. We need to prove, and we'll prove, but you expect that they will be different. Now, I want to demonstrate this idea of endless chain of causes. Now, in this picture, you have these people who are doing a shooting exercise. Now, if each shooter makes a condition not to shoot his weapons until his next colleague shoot first, and if this decision prevails among all of the shooters, then none of them will actually shoot, and the shooting will not be possible. Maybe another example I can give you, if I want to explain why, how did they get here to this world? And if I give a very simple answer, if I say my mother brought me into this world, then the next question, who brought my mother? And then I will say my grandmother. And then the next question, who brought my grandmother? My great-grandmother. And I can continue like this infinitely, and that will not be able to explain why I'm here. Because you will still have these questions, and it will be contradictory. It's impossible, it's contradictory, because I am here. I do exist. But how did I get here? So this is explain this endless chain of causes is impossible. Now, what we have said so far, we have established that every possible existence is an effect that requires a cause. It is not possible to have an endless chain of causes without the first cause. So we need to have the first cause. Otherwise, we will not be able to explain how all these possible existences, they came into being, and this will contradict the reality, because the reality, these things exist. Therefore, the first cause is a necessary existence, is an existence that does not need a cause. That's how we define it. Now, in other words, the first cause is necessary to complete the chain of causes for the possible existence to come into being. Therefore, God is the first cause because he has the will, the power, and the knowledge to bring the possible or contingent objects into being. Now, I'm making assumption here. He has the will, the power, and the knowledge. I'm going to prove that in the last part of this series. But we can take that assumption. Now, it is logically impossible that God should not exist. It is logically impossible that God should not exist. Why? Because he is the causal of all that which exists. Without God, nothing will come into existence. So if we take God out, we cannot explain about existence of all these objects around us. Now, scholars have given other names to the first cause, such as the absolute cause, or initial cause, or no cause cause. So if you go and do a little bit more reading, if you're interested to do a little bit more reading in these areas, if you come across these terminologies, they mean the same thing. They refer to the first cause, and that is God. Now, God and his creations, they differ not only in attributes, and we will talk about attributes. We will prove the attributes of God, and we'll talk about them. But what I want to say here, and I want to emphasize here, more fundamentally in their modes of existence, because many of the atheists, when they talk about God, their understanding of God is different. You know, their description of God, even for Muslim, we can deny that God. You know, if their understanding of God is an old man with beard living in the sky, that is not our understanding of God, and we will reject that as well. So it's important sometimes when you engage atheists, try to establish the common ground. You know, ask him or her, what is his understanding of God? What is his concept of God? Maybe you will not, you will not accept also existence of that kind of God. So the difference between necessary existence and possible existence, or the existence of God and the existence of God's creation, is in the mode of existence, because God is necessary existence while creations are possible existence. Now, this is important because there are many ramifications of this, and we will look into a little bit more of this, inshallah. Now, I want to illustrate the dependence of possible existence to the necessary existence. This will show our dependence to God, all right? It's how we depend on him completely. Now, I want to use an example, this activity of human imagination, but there is a big disclaimer. It is only used here as an example because the human will and the human soul are not necessarily existent. They are not necessarily existent. I'm only using here as an example. وَلَهُ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. So there's no comparison of anything to God. This is only for you to be able to conceptualize. Now, whenever you imagine something in your mind, for example, you imagine a rose, a flower, you will have a mental image of the rose in your mind. This mental image of the rose in your mind, it exists because it has been actualized by your will, by the will of your soul. So the mental image of the rose is an effect, ma'lul, which can be thought of as a possible existence. And your will in this situation, as an example, is a cause, is illah, which we can think of it as a necessary existence, just as an example. Now, the cause, your will, is constantly needed for the existence of an effect that imagine rose in your mind. And therefore, the imagine rose is completely dependent upon your will at all the time. Any shift of your attention, meaning absence of the cause, the imagined rose will cease to exist. I hope you get it. If you just shift your attention and you think about something else, that rose will cease to exist. And this is shows the dependence here. Because many people, when we talk about creation, they think in a worldly understanding. If I make something, if I create, let's say, a bicycle, the bicycle is not connected to me. You know, I could create the bicycle here and the bicycle can be shipped to another country and there is no any connection. Its existence really does not depend on me. I may, you know, a person who is going to use the bicycle may come back to me for some maintenance, but that's all about it. But our, you know, our situation is different with God because He has given us life, and therefore we depend on Him continuously. It's the only other example maybe I can give is the relationship between the sun and the sun rays. You know, the sun rays are not part of the sun. They are not, you know, like we are not part of God because theologically we cannot say that. But yet there is this very close relationship or connection. And that's why God tells us in the Quran that He's closer to us than our jugular vein. And in another verse when He said He's closer to us than our own soul. Because that closeness, okay? So I hope it is clear. Now, from this understanding of God, which we have used our reason, we have not made reference to the scriptures, okay? We can derive also some more understanding or more attributes of God. So let's go back to the possible existence. A possible existence which needs a cause to come to existence and to remain in existence is an effect. We already said that, ma'lul, which comes after the cause, after illah. So you need to have a cause and then it becomes an effect. Now, if the cause, illah, is annihilated, meaning it is destroyed or is not actualized, then there will be no effect. There will be no ma'lul. And therefore, the possible existence will not exist. Now, with for an existence to be non-existing at any interval of time, it indicates that the existence is a dependent. So anything that at any moment in time, it doesn't have to be very specific, any moment. If it ceases to exist, if it is non-existing at that moment, it means that it is dependent because it needs a cause to bring it into existence, and therefore itself is an effect or possible existence. Now, since the necessary existent has always existed and remains in existence by means of itself, by means of its own essence, and it does not require any external existence or cause, it means that the necessary existence could not have been non-existing at any interval of time. So it means that God was without a beginning. And that's why the Quran tells us he is the first, meaning that he never had an antecedent of non-existence. And God is without an end, he is the last, and this is what the Quran tells us about a very important attribute of God, meaning that he will never be non-existent. Because if he will be non-existent, he will not be necessary existence, because he will fall into the possible existence, like creation. Now, also from this what we have derived so far, we can explain about the non-corporeality nature of God. Non-corporeality meaning immaterial nature of God. We can derive this also through reason. The necessary existence must be simple and must be indivisible without parts, because of two reasons. Every composite thing is a synthesis which in need of parts to be complete, while the necessary existence is independent from any needs. Also, the necessary existence is not made up of parts, because anything that has parts intellectually has the potential to be divided and has the possibility of being annihilated. But the necessary existence cannot be divided or annihilated. And therefore, he cannot be indivisible. He cannot be divisible. He is indivisible, and he has to be simple. Now, because having parts, whether potential or actual, is peculiar to corporeality or material nature, therefore, the necessary existence is non-corporeal, immaterial. By the same token, the necessary existence is invisible, unseen, that is, cannot be sensed through the corporeal senses, seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, and smelling. By disassociating corporeality and materiality from the necessary existence, which is present in possible existence, several other possibilities are nullified about God. For example, the necessary existence is not subjected to time and space. He is outside time and space. Space is imagined for a thing which has material body and dimensions. And every temporal, meaning time-based object, has the potential of being divided at intervals. Since space and temporality are not attributed to the necessary existence, therefore transition, growth, and movement also can be invalidated in necessary existence, because there is no transition, growth, and movement without time and space. And therefore these also cannot be attributes of God. Some people, they misinterpret the scriptures sometimes by believing that God sits on a throne or descends from heaven or can be seen by the naked eye. They are viewing him as being subjected to space and time, growth, movement, and transition. And they have failed actually to fully grasp God's true nature. Now, so this basically, we have used reason to reach to understanding of God. You may have a question and say, but how many these first causes? Because I've not said how many. You may argue maybe could it be more than one? Now I'm going to go through the proper argument on the oneness of God in the last part, but an idea. Let's suppose that there are two necessary existence, two or more. Let's say two. Now these two beings will either be exactly alike, or they will be in every respect, or they will be different. Now, if they're exactly alike, then it is only one being. It cannot be two beings. So the problem is solved. So there is only one first cause, or there's only one necessary existent. Now, if, for example, they're different, okay, it means that now we have two situations if they're different. If only one has extra things, extra attributes that are different from the other one, then the one that has extra, it means that he has a compounded parts. And we already say God cannot have compounded parts, and therefore he cannot be necessarily existent, and therefore there's only one, the first one who is necessarily existent. Now, you can have another situation where, for example, if both of them have different, if both necessary existence beings were distinguished from each other by an extra attribute in each, then each will be compounded of two parts, and therefore both of them cannot be necessary beings because of this composition, and therefore, consequently, they will not be necessarily existent. So there's only one necessary existence. And we will prove this more, inshallah, in the last part. So now I want to respond to some of these atheist arguments, okay, using our knowledge that we have acquired so far of understanding God, and this knowledge we have acquired through reason. Again, we have not used the scriptures. So one of the common questions asked by the new atheists, if God exists, why can't we see him? And their problem is because they just stuck with this physical universe. They do not accept it. They do not believe anything beyond the physical universe. They don't believe anything supernatural. And therefore, to them, it is very difficult to grasp the concept of intangible reality, the unseen world. And that's why Quran is teaching us all the time to think about the unseen world, and this is part of our belief. We are required to believe in angels, for example, because to develop this ability. Now, the answer to this false argument, and I'm going to use this slide in the next one to try to enhance this argument. The perception of the senses are due to an outcome of coherence between bodily parts, the parts that senses, and the substance to be perceived. For example, each one of our senses perceive a particular material form, and which is proportional for that sense with defined conditions. In the same way, one cannot expect the eyes to have the sense of sound or the ears to have the sense of sight. One must not expect our senses to perceive every existent. So our senses are not equipped of sensing the reality of the necessary existence. Why? Because we already said the necessary existence is non-corporeal, it's immaterial, it is outside of time and space. Now, among the material existence, the possible existence, there are things which are not able of being directly perceived through our senses, yet we are not denying their existence. For example, we cannot directly perceive some of the radio and electromagnetic waves or microbes like a COVID-19 today, yet we do not deny. And the reason we do not deny them because we can perceive their effect on us, and that is enough for us. So we perceive many realities through other than the means of our outward senses, and we confidently believe in the existence, and we talk about this in the first part. For example, we perceive the state of love and fear, happiness, sadness, conscious intention, all of these are psychological stations. Even the perception itself is immaterial and imperceptible, and yet we accept it. Now, theists do perceive God, and experience him through his attributes of mercy, kindness, peace, loving, forgiveness. Just like the sun, we cannot focus our gaze at it, but we enjoy its attributes of light, warmth, and solar energy. These are attributes that we very much understand the sun through these attributes. So all things that we perceive through our senses are manifestations of God's attributes. They are God signs. It means that if you pick an apple, if you pick a rose, if you pick anything, and you enjoy and you marvel yourself, it takes you back to understand God, because it is a manifestation of his attributes. So to summarize, God can't be seen by a human eye because human eye has limitation. And human eye can only see that it encounters, which has dimensions and occupies space. But as we have said, God does not have corporeal reality, which means he doesn't have dimensions or occupy any space. That is the logic. In fact, God can't be sensed by any of the 5 human sensory organs because of 2 things. On one side, these sensory organs have limitations. And on the other side, God has perfection. His qualities are qualities of perfection and infinite. Now, we have this science conundrum and the existence of God. Science focuses its attention on what we can observe. And God is outside time and space. We have already said that. Therefore, we cannot directly observe him. Any method of thinking that relies on observation cannot deny what it cannot observe. It is illogical. Simply because you cannot observe, you cannot deny. So because science has been successful in improving our lives and in improving our understanding of the reality of the universe, atheists, they perceive science as being the only way to understand the truth. And science has answer for all questions. But this is not true. And they think God is no longer needed. This is an atheist delusion. They are deluded. Atheists want to deify science. They want to make science like God. But since science can only explain the reality of physical world by answering the how questions, it cannot answer the why question, like why we're here. Science cannot explain to us why here, where we're going, how to prepare for where we're going, and what is the life beyond this, cannot explain. So neither science itself leads to atheism. This fact has been attested by many Western philosophers of science. And we have example because Muslims have a long history of science. For over a millennium, they were building the foundation of science before the Europeans, but they did not produce atheism in the same way when Europeans took over. On the contrary, many of the classical Muslim scientists, they were scholars of various Islamic traditions at the same time. Now, atheists like Richard Dawkins, they sell to the public this idea that when something is labeled scientific, it is a fact and a certain. But that is not true, because science tries to explain phenomena in the physical world using scientific models. But these models don't represent absolute truth. They are based on probabilistic frameworks. There are a lot of assumptions, the foundational beliefs, and there are many disputes. And discussion and researches continue within the scientific community on various models. And it is possible to change a position later with new data. Now, I want to give you quickly a few examples. There was a time when the universe was thought of to be eternal. But after the theory of Big Bang, they changed their mind. And now they say it is finite. There was a point that time was seen as linear. But with Einstein's law of relativity, that has changed. Newtonian physics has been overruled by the quantum mechanics. Ptolemy's geocentric model of solar system, where Earth is at the center, has been, changed by the Copernicus heliocentric model, where the sun is at the center. So science will change. So scientific truth is not absolute truth. Even this evolution thing that we have today, it will change, or it may change in the future, because it has been inferred from limited observation. More observation, more knowledge, more ideas, it will change. So new observation can change claimed scientific truth, and that is the beauty of science. Truth is not set in stone. Now, a common objection that we hear from new atheists: who created God? Now, this objection can be found in Richard Dawkins' famous book, The God Delusion, and he bank on this kind of question, to push his disbeliefs. His assumption that the mode of existence of the creator is similar to that of the creation. All what he has to do is to learn a little bit about our tradition, and it will save him a lot, because it indicates his own delusion in his understanding of the reality of God. We have already said in this session, it is important to understand the difference in the modes of existence between God, the necessary existence, and his creations, the possible existence. God does not require a cause, but God's creation, they do. Therefore, only a possible existence required a cause, but a necessary existence requires no cause, because it exists by itself, by its own essence. So it is the first cause, and it is absolute cause and no cause. Therefore, the question, who created God, is logically absurd question. It has no meaning. God has always existed. He has no cause, and thus has no creator. Neither can we say that God created himself, because that will be absurd as well. Because if you say God created himself, it means that there was a point he did not exist. Now, today there are many dubious arguments that are peddled by new atheists, such as the universe was created by a big bang, or came from nothing, or born out of multiverse. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides a powerful logical argument for his existence in the Quran, addressing the atheists in a form of rhetoric.
أم خلقوا من غير شيء أم هم الخالقون أم خلقوا السماوات والأرض بل لا يوقنون.
If you break down these two verses, you will see there are four possibilities. And these are presented as rhetoric only, meaning God is asking them, did you create, is this created from nothing or by nothing? Or is it self-created? Or created by something created, right? Or created by something uncreated, the first cause. So the Quran is not saying that the Arabs whom it addressed actually believe that things were created by nothing, or that they created themselves. They certainly did not claim that, okay? But the Quran is only making clear to the atheists that the absurdity of their position of denying God. Now, you have this guy, Lawrence Krauss. He's also considered one of the atheist horsemen, the people who really drive atheism today globally. A very vocal new atheist, and he has proposed a universe from nothing in his famous book as an argument for non-existence of God, in trying to explain about the universe. Now, asserting that thing can come from nothing means that thing can come into being from no potential, no matter, no causal, nothing at all. Such assertion defies our intuition and stand against reason. No, the universe could not have come from nothing. Nothingness cannot produce anything, and something cannot arise from no causal conditions whatsoever. You know, the reason that the universe could not have come from nothing, it's so intuitive because it is based on the foundational belief or rational principle. Being cannot come from non-being. And to assert the opposite, that the universe could come into being without any causal condition at all, is absurd. Now, Lawrence Krauss' argument of a universe from nothing was defeated by atheist apologetics, but even by some of his fellow scientists. They didn't buy that. Some new atheists contended the theist view, and they asked, if you cannot have something from nothing, how did God create from nothing? So you get this kind of question. Now, this contention is false, as it applies that God is nothing. God is the unique agent with the potential to create and bring things into existence through his will, power, and knowledge. By saying God created the universe from nothing, it simply means from no material. But God's will, power, and knowledge were the causal to bring the universe into existence and to sustain its existence. So it is irrational to assert that something can emerge from absolute void without any potential or prior causal activity. God provides that causal activity. Now, some atheists, they put this idea that universe could create itself. Now, the term created means emerge, and therefore it was once not in existence. By corollary, it is a finite. By understanding the reality of existence, which we have today, you know, we have done quite a lot to understand the reality of existence, it leads to conclude that self-creation is logically and practically impossible, because the self-creation implies that something was in existence and not in existence at the same time, which is impossible. Something that emerged means it was once not in existence. However, to say that it has created itself, it implies it was in existence before it existed. And if you really want to understand this, I want to give you a good example. Can we have a woman that gives birth to herself? Is it possible? No, it's not possible. Because you can't give birth to yourself, because you have not existed. How can you give birth? Now, the last slide, I think I've gone a few minutes. I'm very sorry. This is the last slide, inshallah. What about multiverse? So this is a new idea that has come up recently. Now, atheists, for a long time, they were arguing that the universe was eternal. I already said that. And it was not the work of God. When in the Quran, it is explained that the universe is created, is finite. God has said this to us, 1400 years ago. Everywhere, when you read the Quran, you have this assertion that the Quran is created. God created the universe. But, the atheists did not believe us. Now, in 1920s, Edwin Hubble observed expansion of the universe, which is also said in the Quran about the expansion of the universe is mentioned. This observation, it led to discovery of the Big Bang Theory, and it became scientifically now proven that the universe is actually finite. Now, atheists, they found now new argument that the universe emerged from Big Bang. And theists, we argue with them, we said, so what came before Big Bang? And that's why they want to come up with all these ideas, like Lawrence Krauss saying it came from nothing, because before Big Bang, like there was nothing. But now, this theory of the universe came from Big Bang is facing the challenge by the fine-tuning theory that the universe displays a fascinating order, where features and laws of nature have been specially designed and fine-tuned to support life on Earth. And this could not have come randomly by chance. So, for example, life on Earth can occur only if certain fundamental universal physical constants lie within a very narrow range of values, very, very small values. You know, like a position of our Earth with respect to the sun. Only little tilt towards the sun or little tilt away from the sun, it will make life not possible. So if any of the several of these fundamental universal constants were only slightly different, the Earth will be unlikely to support life. So it cannot be imagined or expected that this fine-tuning occurred by itself, randomly, by chance, without a designer. So the idea of multiverse, if the number of universes were large, the likelihood of having the universe that permits life will be reasonable. So they wanted to overcome this fine-tuning idea, so they came up with this multiverse theory. Now, multiverse has not been proven, and it is beyond the reach of observation. Many scholars think it is crazy to postulate a trillion causally connected universes in order to explain the features of the one universe that we know. Very simple, just believe in God and we'll do the job. Thank you very much.